Marcus Aurelius once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Well, I guess with money on the mind, at least the colors of the rainbow are well represented. To be honest, I have been meaning to make this video for a while. I wasn't sure ultimately if I wanted to discuss TV shows on the channel, but television is truly a wonderful medium, capable of telling complex narratives and conducting fascinating character studies over a long period of time. These last few years, I have watched more seasons of television than I ever have. However, only one television show has made me feel as if this was our decade's defining series, and that is HBO's Industry. Yeah, you thought I was gonna say Succession. Nah, bro, Industry. Industry, in my opinion, despite HBO airing a now fourth season of the show, arguably making it one of its flagships, is kind of underrated. I don't really know how or why, but I am here to shed some light, to heap some praise, and to explain what exactly makes this show the defining series of the 2020s and beyond. Industry is an unflinching look at the ruthless nature of the financial industry, from the perspective of a group of young graduates looking to establish themselves at a fictional investment bank, Pierpoint. The show takes place in the UK and features mostly UK actors, quite unusual for a show on an American network. But even more uniquely, the show was created and written by Conrad Kay and Mickey Down, two former investment bankers of the UK's financial industry. The saying goes, write what you know. And let me say, Kay and Down absolutely fucking know. They know to a level that is almost haunting. And because of them and their writing, Industry is quite unlike any show I have ever seen. Kay and Down's characterization and character-driven narrative may be some of the most real, raw, and truly human portrayals I have ever seen in fiction. They truly understand their characters intuitively, they show every facet of their character's personality, even the unsavory aspects, and let the characters' actions drive the plot forward. I will say, their style is so different than anything you may have seen. It may take some getting used to, but don't be afraid, you're an adult, you can handle it. To enhance the performance of their actors, Down and Kay use an interesting casting technique. For nearly all the parts of the newly grads working at Pierpoint, they hired newly grads from drama schools, meaning not only were the age of the actors the same as their characters, but both were basically in the same parts of their lives. Young professionals entering their first real job and the beginning of adulthood. The casting director, Kay and Down, clearly had an amazing eye for talent because the once unknown actors have all started to blossom into fine thespians. Myha'la Herrold, David Johnson, Marissa Abela, and Harry Lottie, since starring on the show, have all gone on to do major Hollywood productions. Now, the plot of this series on the surface seems pretty straightforward, but through 3 and now 4 seasons, the issues these characters face, specifically in the setting that it takes place, gives us a canvas to paint some of the most visceral and complex illustrations of the human psyche I have ever seen in media. There is something about the chaotic, fraternalistic, barbarous, unrelenting setting of Pierpoint Bank, juxtaposed against the vulnerability, fragility, and emotional nature of its employees, that creates the perfect conditions to show raw and intimate portrayals of human interaction. And that is just what Industry does. The show is about to enter its 4th season, which I am excited about, but honestly, this series has an incredible 3-season arc that a 4th season will have a difficult task of living up to. And while Industry does feature a number of incredible character perspectives, especially in the later seasons, the identity of what Industry is and what I believe it aims to portray revolves around the evolution of mainly 3 characters. For me, these 3 characters, Harper Stern, Yasmin Kara Hanani, and Robert Spearing, are fundamental perspectives in which Kay and Down are able to craft rich stories of envy, desire, vulnerability, greed, and acceptance. And so in this analysis, I want to focus on these 3 characters and their 3-season arcs to illuminate why I believe Industry is the only TV show right now that matters. And with that, I would like to start off with the first character perspective we see in the show. Harper Stern, the Brain. Played flawlessly by Myha'la Herrold, who I believe on more than one occasion has been snubbed of an Emmy or Golden Globe nomination. Harper is a brilliant, bright mind, perhaps even a prodigy, who out of the 3 characters has had the most unorthodox path to Pierpoint. She is a visible minority of a lower-class single-parent household coming from a US non-target school. Despite this, she impresses Eric, one of her managers at Pierpoint, who himself is an incredible character played by Ken Leung, and begins her journey at Pierpoint. At the beginning of the series, we come to see Harper is extremely neurological, sometimes very cold and calculating, and someone who struggles with emotionality. On a deeper level, Harper's brain is both her superpower and her kryptonite. Harper is undoubtedly one of the grad class's best and brightest, yet we see and get hints throughout the seasons that Harper struggles with severe, crippling anxiety. For her, all defeats are psychological but feel physically debilitating. Episodes like Shesh and Reduction in Force show us how this anxiety limits Harper's ability to truly break through at Pierpoint. And with this information, it is easy to become invested in Harper's journey and feel sorry for her. But as the season progresses, we see the kind of character study and deconstruction that Kay and Down have absolutely perfected. Harper is not a victim. Actually, she herself will resent you for even thinking about her in this way. Harper may not be a people person, but Harper is a great manipulator and manager of people. And throughout the seasons, we really get to see this uncomfortable truth of Harper's personality. Harper does not see herself as a culture changer or a team player, but a temporarily embarrassed billionaire with the ego of a great Caesar. Harper loves when her ego is catered to, which is the driving force of her relationship with Eric. He sees Harper as she sees herself, a hungry, abled analyst with the skills to get to the top. Likewise, Harper absolutely hates when her ego is bruised. In season 2, we pick up Harper in a different space than in season 1. The COVID pandemic has caused Harper's standing at Pierpoint to be diminished, and once again, she is in a position of having to prove her worth. Only this time, Harper doesn't feel a chip on her shoulder, but rather disrespected, her ego bruised, and her worth overlooked. She attempts to solidify her standing by trying to hold the attention of a new finance billionaire on the street, but with these attempts, Harper places her end goal above all else, and we slowly see the last of her relationships at Pierpoint slowly erode, as she lies, cheats, and manipulates all those around her in an effort to ensure total victory. And with this, industry shows us that ambition has a price. It is a snake eating its own tail. And by the end of season 2, the once brilliant and calculated Harper has been humbled to a place of desperation, emotional volatility, and lack of foresight. Most interestingly about Harper's character arc is where we find her at the beginning of season 3. Defeated by her previous escapades, Harper still finds herself in the financial sphere, but on the outside looking in, her previous goals seemingly out of reach. It is once again now easy to see Harper as we did in season 1, bright-eyed, insightful, and brilliant. But Down and Kay have fully exposed us to the nature of our character, and we see one of the most intense characterizations portrayed on screen. Instead of Harper learning from her mistakes of the past, realizing she cannot continue in her lying, manipulative ways, the moment the door back into a career as an analyst opens, Harper doubles down on all her bad habits, delivering some of the most frankly scummy, manipulative plays we ever even see in the show. A full Returnal feeding the wolf inside, Walter White to Heisenberg. You see, Harper's characterization speaks to a larger point of the relationships between institutions and people. Harper comes from the place of the common folk. She has a black racial identity, one arguably financial institutions have benefited the most from historically, and yet feels the most indoctrinated into this system than nearly any other character in the series. To me, with Harper, Down and Kay are trying to say something about the way institutions can program individuals to take on traits, responsibilities, and practices that are largely detrimental to them as individuals, but beneficial to the institutions. Simultaneously, however, they are probing at the idea of certain individuals being naturally primed for this type of environment, asking the question of, is it the capitalist institutions that make us behave this way, or is it us individuals who crave this hierarchy and the opportunity to invoke our dominance? Yasmin Karahanani is the heart. Played wonderfully by Marissa Abela, Yasmin is an heiress to one of the UK's biggest publishing companies, and as a result has never not known a life of material comfort. Yet when we meet her, it's quite clear that Yasmin is anything but comfortable with her life. She lives in the basement of her parents' townhouse with her underachieving slacker boyfriend, and has at a minimum a strained relationship with her parents. Yasmin struggles to feel valued and seen beyond what others can immediately identify, which is her wealth and her beauty. She even says this in her Pierpoint interview, that she wants to work there because she wants her ideas to be heard. Her own parents don't even really take her career at Pierpoint seriously. And in many ways, and especially as the seasons progress, Yasmin shows us that money cannot buy happiness if the heart is unfulfilled. Down and Kay are so skillful at showing the different facets of our characters' personalities. Yasmin and Harper eventually move in together, and we really get to see the other aspects of Yasmin's personality manifest, most notably her volatile emotional nature. Yasmin is extremely sensitive and displays envy and jealousy of others. She becomes envious of Harper's growing importance and relationship with Eric at Pierpoint. She asks Harper for rent money after Harper harmlessly does something that she doesn't like, even though she had previously said that Harper could stay for free. Ultimately, Yasmin's issue is that her explosive nature and desire for validation lead her to be unable to separate the personal from the professional. As we progress into season 2, Yasmin gains much of the responsibility she previously coveted, but still struggles much with her internal image. A new female grad on the desk very much challenges Yaz to reflect on her own experiences. This creates a feeling of resentment in Yasmin. Resentment for the grad not allowing herself to be mistreated like she was, and simultaneously resentment toward herself for allowing it to be this way. There becomes a very evident internal struggle for Yasmin based on what she wants in her heart versus her external reality and needs. This comes to a head with the conflict with her father toward the end of the season. Yasmin wants to be taken seriously as a professional and to be taken seriously by her father, whose constantly patronizing, belittling, and upsetting behavior brings Yasmin to a point of pure anger. And with this, Yasmin receives the first real consequences of living authentically, and it shakes her. As we follow Yasmin into the third season, we see her completely at her lowest, in circumstances she never could have imagined for herself. With this season, we begin to see Yasmin's relationship with her wealth and her morality. When she was well taken care of in her life, it was much easier for Yasmin to be optimistic, kind, and focused on her career. With the change in circumstances, we are reminded of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yasmin's pyramid, the basics that have allowed her whole life to only be concerned with self-esteem and self-actualization, are crumbling, and with it, her sense of self. And with this, Yasmin is steered into some pretty difficult situations and is ultimately forced to make a choice between her heart and her needs. What's so interesting about Yasmin's struggle is that she's actually not so different from a character like Gus, who begins to feel like there's a growing distance between his heart and his head, and as a result, he decides to take a stand and live authentically. The writers offer a more complex, gender perspective for Yasmin's character. For a woman, living authentically, saying what you feel, sticking it to the man, can be an incredibly dangerous thing, reputationally, professionally, and literally. The character arc of Yasmin is surprisingly poignant. When first introduced, it could be easy to dismiss the character as the pretty rich girl who gets humbled by the cutthroat Pierpoint environment. However, Down and Kay use Yasmin to say the most about human imperfection. They use Yasmin to show how the matters of the heart are not as simple as breaking free, that especially for women, there is often an aspect of needing to survive that does not always coexist peacefully with the matters of right and wrong. Could you do the right thing if you knew it would ruin you, ruin your family, your children? If you made the choice to betray what your heart tells you is right, could you live with yourself? What is the price, or rather the cost, of your integrity? Yasmin's arc is truthful and painful, and Kay and Down ask all the right questions to get us to reflect on our own answers. Finally, Robert Spearing, The Soul, played effortlessly by Harry Lottie. When we are introduced to Robert, he is a handsome, brooding young grad on the desk, an Oxford man with the suaveness of a James Bond and the sly tongue of a born salesman. Robert is a wild boy, meandering around London's party scene, doing hard drugs, womanizing, and barely making it to work on time. He is frankly without purpose, and therefore without drive. He is aimless and drifting, coping for himself being absent in his own life by using drinking, sex, and substance abuse. Robert is so interestingly written because for a time, he is meant to be fooling us, the audience, into thinking that he is someone he is not. Unlike Harper, Rob is not an unconventional grad for Pierpoint, but unlike Yaz, despite how it may seem, Robert does not come from wealth, but he is trying, most desperately, to not let anyone know that. In fact, we actually don't find out anything about Robert's background until the second season, where we see here that he has halted most of his substance abuse tendencies. Despite this, Robert's problems are not solved, and that is because Robert does not know himself. His soul, his essence, his reason for being are in disarray, and with the absence of alcohol, Robert falls into a new temptation, one just as damaging to his soul: complacency. In his job, in his relationships, and within himself. Rob is looking for someone to see him, but he doesn't realize that he must first see himself. Throughout the seasons, there's a running motif between Rob and the characters he's interacting with. While many see his potential, almost all of them view him as, and excuse my language here, a pussy. And I am not saying that for dramatic effect. Rob literally gets called the variation of that word around 10 times by many different people over the course of the series. But I believe this is intentional from the writers. Rob is experiencing this sort of treatment because he allows himself to, because he surrenders agency of his own life to others. But in season 3, we begin to see things that Rob believed in evaporate. And with this uncertainty and a pretty cerebral ayahuasca trip, Rob realizes his lack of agency, makes himself big to himself in his own life, and ultimately chooses to walk away from a life that doesn't suit him. Robert's story is perhaps the most personal and the most grounded, and with his character arc, I believe Kay and Down make a definitive statement regarding the importance of knowing oneself. If we are without understanding of our soul, without a definitive bearing of who we are, we can become institutionalized, used and abused by the people and the institutions around us. But more frighteningly, we risk the possibility of waking up one day and not being able to look at ourselves in the mirror. It should matter to us what we do, who we help, and who we love. Every decision we make impacts our ability to be at peace with ourselves. And with this, it's easy to see why Mickey Down and Conrad K left their previous lives as bankers. Perhaps deep down, they felt a more true calling. Industry is honestly so much more than what I even discussed in this video. Watching it feels like watching an honest, empathetic view of the chaos and morally complex nature of human existence. And even though it features some dark themes when watching it, I cannot help but feel a little bit more alive, more seen, more understood. And it gives me hope that in a time where every difference among us is exaggerated, we can understand each other a little bit more.